Hi, and welcome back to Business on Broadway here at the Samuel J. Friedman Theater in New York City. I am really excited to bring up our next speaker and presenter for you here today. He is a well-respected estate planning attorney and financial advisor with 26 years of experience providing clients the legal and financial advice that they need. He's known as a trusted advocate for his clients' financial future and helps his clients receive unbiased advice for proper estate planning through his firm, Dupont Wealth Solutions. His combination of financial, legal, and fee-based services ensure that his clients meet their financial goals with success. Please welcome to the Business on Broadway stage, my good friend, Greg Dupont.
Thank you. Good morning. Now, before we even get started today, just a couple quick questions. First, I understand that I am in a room full of entrepreneurs and professionals and otherwise successful people who love their work. But that being said, how many of you still wish to retire someday? And of those of you that wish to retire someday, how many of you are relying upon deferred tax vehicles like IRAs, 401ks, et cetera, to reach your goals? And of those of you that are relying upon these type of tools, would you be a little bit disturbed to find out that the people that you've been relying upon on the way have misled you, perhaps even lied to you? So we're going to talk about a few things here today. But first, why should you listen to me and what I have to say? Well, I started practicing law back in 1992, focusing on estate planning, business planning, taxes, et cetera. And along the way, I decided that I was also going to become a financial advisor. I took the additional training to become a certified financial planner. And now I have a law practice where I have a law partner that sues advisors that go astray, that harm their clients one way or another. And I also have a financial advisory firm. And through my travels and my observations of the industry, I've come to see that there are approximately 3 major traps that people fall into. We're going to talk about 2 of those 3 traps today. But the 3 traps are what I call the retirement industrial complex trap. The second one, the Willie Loman trap. And the third one is the tax deferral trap. And that's a topic for another day. But let's talk about the first 2. First, the retirement industrial complex. To understand what I mean by that, first we need to take a trip back in time. So join me, if you will, in Mr. Peabody's Wayback Machine. And we're going to go back to the late 1950s. And we're going to walk out the door here onto Broadway, and what would we see at that point in time? Well, we'd see the streets are full of American-made automobiles, some of them with absurdly large fins. And as we drove through the canyons of Manhattan, what would we see? We'd see those icons of American economic might: the Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, the Rockefeller Center. Back then, those were owned by American companies. It's not the case anymore. And as we continued our trip through Manhattan, we passed Madison Avenue, the home of the ad men. Now, at this time of day, they've not yet broken for their 2 martini lunches, so they're busily at work. If it was the afternoon, we might wake them up from their naps. And then we'd end up down at the epicenter of the American economic might, Wall Street, specifically the New York Stock Exchange. And if we had the privilege to go into that stock exchange back then in the late 1950s, what would we see? We would see men scurrying about doing their business, busily going from one end of the floor to the other. Human interaction, engaging in negotiation and trade. Human interaction in the form of that trade being completed, and then the guy on the floor has to signal up to the guys in the rafters what happened. That was how trades were done back in that era. Now join me back in the Wayback Machine. We're going to go up to the 1970s. Because the 1970s is when we see the birth of the union between Madison Avenue's madmen and Wall Street stockbrokers. And that is the retirement industrial complex. The retirement industrial complex that probably has defined your savings years. You see, when we talk about IRAs, 401ks, we are not talking about some well thought out governmental program. No. We are talking about an invention of an enterprising stockbroker. stockbroker who saw the provision in the tax code and found a way to exploit it. He found a way that he can go to businessmen and say, Mr. Businessman, I have a way that I can offload the risk of your employees' retirement from your backs to them. That's an easy sale to make, isn't it? But he had a problem, because the general population still felt that that retirement in the stock market alone would be very risky. But he found a solution. He and the madmen looked back to that 1950s era and found a study that was based upon that 1950s era. A study that gave them the foundation that they were able to explode the retirement industrial complex. See, that theory that they relied upon is what's known as modern portfolio theory. You have seen it in your own investments. It's the pretty little pie chart. It's a pretty little pie chart that allows your broker to say to you, hey, just keep those colors in proper balance, and regardless of whether I lose half of your savings at any given time, over time, you'll be fine. Folks, that is a lie. That has never happened. The man who came up with that theory said it was never supposed to use the way it is, and that's the theory that drives most of your retirement. There is another way. There are a small but growing number of advisors that believe that it is not appropriate to look back to data and structures of the 1950s to try to manage your money in accordance with what's going on in 2019, let alone 10, 15, 20 years into your retirement future. So if you see a little pie chart on your stuff, you should think twice. Find yourself an advisor that looks forward, not backwards. The second trap we're going to talk about here today is what I call the Willy Loman trap. You all remember Willy Loman, read Death of a Salesman in high school? Perhaps you went down the street here on Broadway and saw it at one point in time. Willy Loman is the stereotypical, prototypical, plucky, resilient salesman. See, the retirement industrial complex was built on the backs of men like Willy Loman. And what I have seen through my years in this industry is that the result of that is that finding a good advisor, one that is well-rounded and looks at the whole horizon, is very difficult. Willy Lomans of the world find you. And what's the result of that? Well, the probability is that you do not have an advisor that looks at the whole range of options that are available to you to meet your financial objectives. And left prey to the Willy Lomans of the world, you've taken one of two approaches. You have found your Willy Loman, nice enough guy, or you're doing it yourself. Let's talk about the risks of that. See, when you find your own Willy Loman, the probability is he comes from one of the various silos of the retirement industry. And so he brings you the pack on his back, not the full range of options that are out there for you. And not having access to the full range of options, let alone the knowledge to use those full range of options, can seriously jeopardize your future. The second option is that you go it alone. There's a great amount of information out there at your disposal. I contend too much information. You go to the Google machine and what do you see? A bewildering amount of information on financial options. And what happens to us when we have too many options, too much information? We get confused, right? And what happens when we get confused? Well, we may make bad decisions. We may find our own Willy Loman. Or worse, we may just shut down, make no decisions. And folks, what's the problem with being overwhelmed, being confused, and making no decisions with regard to your finances? Well, you put your very financial future in jeopardy. It doesn't have to be that way. I'm part of a small but growing number of advisors who believe that the industry's suitability standard is not sufficient. We believe that the fiduciary standard that was tried to be implemented and imposed upon the financial industry just a year or so ago, which was fought back by industry, is not sufficient either. We believe in true financial advocacy. We believe in being able to look you in the eye and tell you with conviction that what we're doing is in your best interest. And folks, we mean it, and we'll stand behind it. We'll stand behind our word. We will not stand behind a wall of disclaimers. So if anything I said here today resonates with you, or perhaps you want to hear about the third of these traps, which is the tax deferral trap, which could be the biggest risky element in your future, then I invite you to go to my website, www.meetyourfinancialadvocate.com. Again, that's www.meetyourfinancialadvocate.com. And download my publication, How to Retire Worry-Free, and perhaps we'll start a transformative conversation. Thanks for your time today.